click on the raise your hand icon at the bottom of the screen. You'll be prompted to speak up to 3 minutes when it's your turn. For those who is participating by telephone and would like to make a public comment, please press *9 to request to speak. Thank you for your participation.
So Justin and Ann, just so you know, Claire's going to run the presentation material for me. My computer's just a little fussy this afternoon, so I'm going to try to sort it out. And if I need to take it over, I'll be hopefully ready to do that. But at the moment, at least, it's a little clunky.
Okay, I think we're at 5 o'clock. So without any further ado, I think we have all our members. So I'd like to call the meeting, the June 4th Economic Development Committee meeting to order and go to our agenda. And item number 2 is approval of the minutes from February, which is just a correction on the agenda. That is the February minutes we're approving.
John, I'd like to do the roll call first.
I apologize. Yes, please. Roll call.
Committee Member Kane.
Here.
Committee Member Charles.
Here.
Committee Member Chasty.
Here.
Committee Member Goldman.
Here.
Committee Member Sala.
Here.
Committee Member Tiedemann.
Here.
And Chair Montag.
Here. Okay, so let's move on to number 2, which was the minutes of February's meeting. Can I get a motion or comments on it? I see Member Kane. Would you like to be making a comment?
Can you remind myself and members of the public why we have not met since February?
Yes, so we've been, look, maybe I'll defer to staff. Claire, do you want to?
Well, I mean, I think we'll address the question in the announcements. We're going to talk a little bit about our COVID-19 relief.
Okay, so we have the item on the table for February's minutes. Do we have a motion or comments at this point? I have Member Charles. You have to verbally communicate, so take yourself off mute if you'd like.
Yeah, just wanted to make a motion to approve the minutes for February.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll second. Robert Chase.
Thank you. Any comments on those minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor, roll call on the.
We'll do a roll call. Yeah, Committee Member Kane.
Okay.
Committee Member Charles.
Okay.
Committee Member Chasty.
Aye.
Committee Member Goldman.
Yes.
Committee Member Sala.
Aye.
Committee Member Tiedemann.
Aye.
And Chair Montag.
Aye. Okay. With that, we'll move to public comment. And this is the time where anyone who would like to speak on an item not on the agenda can let them approach now.
I do not have any member of the public that raised their hand.
Okay. So with that, we'll close public comment. And we'll move on to item number 4, which is announcements and staff and committee members. So we'll kick it off to staff. This is item 4-1, COVID-19
Yeah, I'm going to
update.
share my screen here. All right, are you able to see my screen there?
Yes.
So to address Committee Member Kane's question, we want to thank you for your patience and understanding as we've transitioned to virtual work and meetings, online meetings. For months, the day-to-day roles of many of our staff have shifted dramatically to focus on concurrent disaster response and recovery, including supporting our local businesses. So I'll provide a brief update on how COVID-19 has affected our operations and summarize our efforts to support the business community during this time. The City Council declared a local emergency on March 16th, and the City of Albany Emergency Operations Center, also known as the EOC, was activated and many staff roles shifted. My role shifted to be full-time public information officer, and our sustainability coordinator, Lizzie Carrad, who is in the public right now. You haven't met her yet, but she took on the role of business support. It was really a big team effort, but she spearheaded that. So we all kind of stepped into new roles because of the emergency. And now our EOC is in monitoring mode, so our roles have begun to shift back to normal, but clearly our priorities for what we're working on in 2020 have shifted drastically. One of those things is focusing our efforts on economic recovery. While the doors of City Hall are closed, our community development department has been issuing permits remotely and this entire time. So their virtual doors have always been open if businesses need them or need any kind of assistance. And if you'd like to learn more about the city's response to the pandemic, please visit our website. There's some comprehensive information there, including information for businesses. The case count in Alameda County is actually on the rise. And the feedback we're getting from the county health officials is that there may not be major changes to the shelter-in-place order in the near future because of that. Jeff, I don't know if you want to provide any more feedback. Jeff's been our EOC coordinator, so he's been coordinating with the county quite closely.
Yeah, thank you. The graph in front of you is it comes off of the county health department webpage dashboard, and this is the number of people that are hospitalized. The blue line is the total number of people hospitalized in Alameda County. The red is the non-ICU patients, and then I guess it's a brown color are the ICU patients. What's important about this graph is you can see the overall hospitalization has been creeping up, and until a couple of days ago, it's actually as high as it's ever been in the county. So we do participate in daily conference calls with Alameda County Public Health Director to talk about what's going on in the county. And this is one of several things that they're looking at that they're worried about. And while some people have in other counties are doing better, Alameda County is not necessarily getting better yet. So unfortunately, they do take sometimes a little bit of a pessimistic tone. The good news is our hospitals have plenty of capacity. Our first responders have plenty of personal protective equipment. And so it's not quite as bad as the horrible days that we saw in New York and elsewhere, but still, this is the graph that I think shows it's still a serious issue. And at least in Alameda County, they're moving pretty slow. I would just add, it's not a graphic that we have here, but in Albany and North Berkeley, we're relatively fortunate compared to the rest of the county. The East Oakland and the San Leandro, Union City, Hayward areas have much higher rates of the COVID-19. So just a little bit of context for you and an idea of some of the conversations that we're having on a regular basis.
Thanks, Jeff. We understand that many small businesses in our community are challenged because of COVID-19 restrictions from the county shelter-in-place order, and that those that are able to operate have had to adapt really quickly to protect the safety of their employees and their customers. While it's encouraging to see how many of our local businesses have been able to adapt quickly to offer services online, it has been really important for us to provide support and resources. So I'm going to go into a little bit about what we've been doing in the past few months. We've been working closely with the Chamber of Commerce and the Solano Avenue Association to coordinate efforts and provide support to the business community. And we discuss these efforts weekly and regularly share resources throughout the week. We've created a comprehensive webpage with resources available to businesses and employees challenged by COVID-19, and we continue to update it with new information as it becomes available. We've promoted these resources through a variety of avenues: emails, weekly e-newsletter. We've expanded our social media presence. This includes promotion of the Chamber and Solano Avenue Association resources, including their lists of operating businesses. In particular, we've been encouraging local businesses to join the Alameda County Small Business Development Center to access free one-on-one advising and support for the application process for existing loans. We partnered with the Chamber of Commerce and local resilience expert Suzanne Frew to put on a webinar last week, providing a space for businesses to discuss challenges with planning to reopen and sort of a forum for their discussion. We've administered 2 surveys now to help inform development of programs to support the business community, the results of which we will share later today. Our city council members reached out to 100 of our major businesses directly to check in, do sort of welfare calls and see how we can support them during this time. And the Albany City Council passed an ordinance placing a temporary moratorium on our residential and commercial evictions and rent increases to protect commercial businesses at risk of eviction. And we believe there's still more to be done. And this is a part of the discussion section of your agenda today, is to kind of talk about what those next steps are. But that's what we've been up to so far.
Does that conclude your presentation, Claire?
It does. I'm having trouble stopping to share my screen, but it does.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes. Who said that?
Stephanie Sala.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't. Okay. There you go. Go ahead.
I was wondering if that moratorium on evictions and rent raising had been extended, because last I knew it was in place till May 31st. Has that been extended since the shelter in place has been extended as well?
Yes, it was extended by the city council. Was it their last meeting or the meeting before? These kind of blur together now, but they're going to be reviewing that, it's extended presently and will continue to be extended on a month-to-month basis. They're going to check in to see how, what's going on in the community, as well as other initiatives. Particularly Alameda County has done some things on the residential eviction side that we're coordinating with.
Any other questions or comments from yes, Member Kane?
Question for Mr. Bond. Oh, that was a great presentation too, by the way, Claire. Did the county hypothesize why there was a spike? I've heard everything from Mother's Day to riots, or sorry, demonstrations.
The numbers that we're seeing on that graph would be unrelated to any of the present demonstration protests, because that's not going to hit till next week probably. It is something that they're monitoring, and they actually will be coming out with some guidance for members of the community that participate in some of those events about whether or not they should get tested, and how to go about getting tested if appropriate. Now, they don't really, they don't get into the medical part of this a lot. With us, at least, it's more kind of operational, I would say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any more questions or comments?
No, sir.
Okay, then maybe we will ask the participant or make sure the attendees who are out there, if there's any questions that they may have or comments on the presentation. I don't see any, so we will move on to item 5, which is presentations, 5-1, presentation of business recovery survey results. And we will take that presentation from Claire.
Great, thanks. So we, as I mentioned, we administered 2 surveys to the local business community to help inform development of programs to help support them. And the first survey was administered in March. Just days after the shelter-in-place order was issued. So it was kind of an initial where are people out, who's open kind of question. So these are sort of the results. We had 77 responses to the survey. The survey indicated that, well, 44% of businesses were not able to operate at all during that time. 55% were able to continue operating and or immediately adapt services to operate at a limited capacity or online only. The vast majority of respondents were either not at risk of being evicted or just weren't sure. And the survey indicated that businesses needed help with loan programs, prompting us to further promote what I mentioned before about the Alameda County Small Business Development Center's Free Assistance Program, and also the Chamber of Commerce hosted a webinar to walk business owners through that application process. So hopefully businesses feel like we have supported their needs in that way. Then we issued a second survey in May, on May 21st, to better understand the effects of COVID-19 and the needs of our business community so we can design programs to help them reopen and recover from the crisis. So those questions were a little bit different. So far, we've received 41 responses. So these are preliminary results. We imagine and hope that we will continue to receive responses to help us make conclusions and design our programs. And we'll analyze the results more carefully in that time. It's important to note that this is not intended to be an academically rigorous analysis, but rather a starting point based on analytical information that can help point us toward areas that we should look at a little bit more carefully. So it's to help inform the conversation. As you see from this graph, the majority of the respondents were business owners and business managers. This is people were able to, this is a pie graph is probably not the best representation now that I look at it, because I think we let people click more than one answer. So I think the percentages might not actually represent that. I apologize. A variety of different business sectors responded to this survey, with a large portion identifying with the service industry. So you can see here the top respondents. Again, people were able to answer more than one thing, but healthcare and medical services, professional services, and personal services had the highest response rates. Just a little bit more background information about who the respondents are. The 60% of respondents were from Solano Avenue businesses. It is important to note that we did not receive any responses from the western part of the city, East Shore or Cleveland, which we know is one of the city's most important sources of tax revenues. So that we hope that we're able to engage those businesses in a different way moving forward. 65% of businesses have, it looks like here some businesses have responded to say that they're essential, but the majority were not deemed as essential as part of the county order. And the majority of businesses do rely on customers coming to obtain products or services. Of course, the people who are asking for help from the city, maybe are more likely to respond to a survey like this, but we also weren't surprised by these numbers, and it indicates that that they've been hurting during this time. It's not a big surprise, but 90% of respondents are dealing with significant impacts on operations, and over 70% have decreased employee hours or are just not able to operate at all. it's clear that businesses are thinking about how to modify their operations. Almost all respondents have implemented or plan to implement regulating the number of customers on site and offering online operations. And they've also implemented curbside pickup and delivery. 30% of respondents are looking to modify their floor plans as they reopen. Businesses are concerned about a lot right now, particularly, I mean, you can see there's a lot of red here on this slide. We asked people what they were most concerned about. Particularly, they're concerned about the continued loss of revenue, reduced customer base and number of employees, and the continued need for reduced in-person operations. They're only slightly less worried about scheduling around childcare and changing the types of employees they hire. They're still concerned about those things, but they're not. There's a little bit more spread there in terms of how many people are concerned. We asked businesses that have locations in other cities how their Albany location has fared during the crisis. And there's really not much to say here because most people, it seems like most respondents probably don't have a business in another location. But we're not faring worse than other locations from this data, but again, it's pretty limited. We asked respondents, sorry, this is a lot of information and I promise we will dive deeper into it later in the agenda. So don't get hung up on how small this text is, but we asked respondents to indicate how helpful each of these actions would be in helping them reopen and recover from the effects of the pandemic and the shelter-in-place order. And respondents indicated that supporting business associations, providing information on public health guidance, and assistance with recruitment and marketing were particularly helpful actions. And again, we're gonna dig a little deeper into this, but for now, I just want to say that a high response rate to a question about a policy initiative does not imply a promise that the city is able to deliver that action. And a low response rate does not mean that we're going to ignore the action, but it helps inform your discussion tonight about how we prioritize these actions. And ultimately, we'll plan to continue our strategy to address business needs on a case-by-case basis. We're open to discussing anything that a business needs that the city can provide if they pick up the phone and give us a call. So we wouldn't be using this data to say, no, we're not going to do that. This concludes my portion of the presentation because like I said, we'll dive into this slide in more detail in the next two presentations, but I want to give an opportunity if Jeff wants to give a little bit of more analysis on the survey.
No, thank you, Claire. There is a lot of information here. I know a lot of people would like to dive deep into this, and we will certainly make it available. This is very much a work in progress. And you know, in terms of prioritizing what we work on and what we don't work on, I think what we really want to prioritize is the, you know, when people reach out to us and say, I've got a problem, can you help me? Or I've got an idea, can we do this for my business or what have you? That's what we want to touch base on. We're starting to have those conversations already with a few businesses, and we will use this analysis as just kind of like Claire said, as a framework of maybe where we start, but it's certainly not the final word by any means. And that I don't have anything. I'd be happy. We all would be happy to answer your questions if you'd like.
Okay, it seems like that concludes the presentation from staff. So let's bring it back to the committee and let's see if there's questions from the members.
Yeah, please let us know if you have any questions.
Okay. All right, I don't see any from the members, so let's see if there's any from the, oh, yes.
I have a question, Robert Chase.
Yes, member
I think
Chief.
it disappeared.
Go ahead.
Are there any programs that Albany anticipates either through the city, the county, that will be able to fund local businesses, actually give them loans? Any actual cash programs the city's running?
I'll take the first shot at that. No, we don't anticipate that. I think the kind of financial resources that we have right now wouldn't really compare to the programs that the state and federal government are putting out. If we could partner with somebody on doing that, we would be interested in exploring that. But in terms of the city having a loan or grant program, that's not something that we see that's in the cards for us right now.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the members? Then I don't see any, so let's go and take public comment. If there's any public comment on this item. Checking. Seeing none, then we will move on from this item and go to 6 on the agenda, which is the discussion of possible actions for the committee. And 6-1 is report and possible action regarding council discussion, potential activities to support physical distancing in the public right of way. So I believe Claire will be speaking to this.
Justin's going to speak to this.
Sorry, Justin.
I will handle this
That's
one.
what I meant.
Good evening, committee members. My name is Justin Freed. I'm the transportation planner for the city, and I'm presenting this one. Next slide, please.
You're going to need to speak up a little bit.
Okay, thank you. So cities across the globe have been evaluating the potential use of street and sidewalk space for a wide range of purposes during the response to COVID-19 and to support community and business recovery as greater activity is resumed. Given Albany's context and the needs to date, discussion here has largely centered around use of streets and sidewalk space for walking, cycling, restaurant pickup and delivery, and outdoor dining. Next slide, please. As Claire mentioned, we have some responses from businesses from the survey that was issued in May, and to date, the responses were largely split regarding support and opposition to strategic street closures. Responses did reflect greater support for permitting additional uses for the sidewalk or parking spaces. In addition to the survey, staff has received a number of public comments on this item as we've had discussions at the Transportation Commission and City Council. We've received comments in support and opposition to street closures or partial closures for additional pedestrian and recreational space on residential streets, both in support and opposition to temporary street closures on Solano Avenue, and more generally in support of the use of sidewalk and parking areas for commercial uses. Next slide, please. At its April meeting, the Transportation Commission discussed this topic and made several recommendations regarding guidance on walking directions for city sidewalks and trails, for the use of parking lanes adjacent to the Ohlone Greenway and Memorial Park and Albany High School. And the commission discussed but did not recommend street closures or partial closures at that meeting. Next slide. On Monday, the City Council authorized this committee and the Transportation Commission to make recommendations regarding opportunities for use of public right-of-way for maintaining social distancing and assisting with the needs of the local business community. The authorization also did provide parameters for these recommendations, including that they be temporary, that they maintain access, they maintain safety, and are within existing city resource capacity. Next slide, please. So the city does already have examples of both sidewalk cafe seating and in-street seating, the bus stop parklet. Shown here are additional examples of more temporary in-street dining installations. Next slide. As well as some more examples of the types of temporary materials for street or sidewalk treatments that can be used for installations, both for placing within the street and for actually applying to the street or the sidewalk temporarily. Next slide. So while we wish to be as open and flexible as possible with the possibility for use of public right-of-way, safety and access considerations do have a number of constraints that is feasible. This is an example that another city has put together, but is pretty illustrative of the same guidance that we're under. So these include maintaining 6 feet of clearance on the sidewalk and access to entryways, maintaining safe distance from and visibility for vehicles in the travel lane, as well as cones and barriers between the vehicle lane, adjacent parking, and public areas. Also maintaining the required spacing between tables does limit the number of tables you can provide in these facilities. And one other constraint in terms of where we might be considering these is San Pablo Avenue. The in-street use is not within the city jurisdiction. It's maintained by Caltrans. Next slide, please. So the city is able and willing to review these type of requests under our current process. For sidewalk cafe requests, there's no fee and it is a staff level approval. For use of parking spaces, the fee is the standard $146. For encroachment permits, and approval is at the staff level for temporary use. And then it's dependent upon scale and impact for non-temporary uses. To date, we have received one detailed inquiry and we're in discussions with the property owner on that. And we expect to receive more details next week from them. In terms of changes to the process that could further support businesses wishing to pursue in-street uses, staff recommends this committee could consider recommending to council permitting staff to treat these in-street temporary commercial uses like we do currently for the sidewalk cafe requests. Next slide. And the specifics for that recommendation would entail would be the fee waiver, would be waiving our current fee for in-street use, and specifying that while this is temporary installation, the duration is unknown at current, so that for the time period we're within these health orders, that we consider that temporary and would do that at the staff level. So those are what staff would propose as changes that this body could recommend to council, and happy to answer any questions that the committee has. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. So let's bring it back to the members. Do we have any comments or questions of staff? Yes, member GC.
Yeah, I don't see my picture up there anymore, so I don't know if you can see me.
I can.
Oh, great. Okay, so I'll stop picking my nose. Thanks for letting me know. So first things, if say a restaurant wanted to try this out, how quickly could the restaurant get up and running and put, say, 6 to 8 to 10 tables out?
We haven't fielded a detailed request yet, but we anticipate being able to turn this around in a matter of business days. We don't see a huge issue on our end. We with the experience we've had for the previous examples for the bus stop parklet and sidewalk cafe permits, the issues of access, the county health codes change, but we're up to speed on where those are at. And as those guidelines for outdoor areas evolve, we'll continue to monitor that. But we don't see any issues in terms of staff review being able to be done in a matter of days.
So let's say, and I don't have an example, but let's say that you have a very active takeout business next door to a restaurant that would like to take up some parking spaces to be able to expand into the street. How would you address that problem? But the problem being that the takeout place wants the parking or as much parking as possible, and the restaurant with the tables wants to take up some parking.
Right. So we encourage business owners to work together on this. We understand that there are adjacencies, and a lot of businesses only have adjacency to 1 or 2 parking spaces. These kind of installations do work better as they're larger, because you do have a neighboring park. But If it's adjacent to the business owner, we would generally, I think, in this situation, defer to the frontage of the business. But if this committee or the Transportation Commission has recommendations on additional things we should do, or ways we should balance that, we're willing to entertain them. But I think we're at this point recommending to defer and to speed, to being able to do this without a long engagement process, and to help restaurants or help other users get this out quickly. But our initial guidance would be you get to deal with what's your frontage, but we would encourage you to work with your adjacent businesses to do something a little more coordinated.
So as a general rule, then, most businesses could expect to be allowed to at least put things right in front of their storefronts on the sidewalk for that first, I guess, few feet out from the building, right? At a minimum, they'd be able to expect that.
It's easiest if you're dealing with your frontage. It gets trickier as you're expanding beyond that. And we would look to have greater coordination, the sort of greater impact you're having on adjacent.
And how
we do have another comment from a member, if that's okay. We can Yes, Member Sala.
I would like to encourage this committee or ourselves, or however I'm supposed to address this, to encourage City Council to waive that $146 encroachment permit fee. I think a lot of our businesses, including especially restaurants, are really struggling right now, and anything that the city can do to support them financially, I think is the right thing to do if we want to see them survive. So even though it's not a ton of money, I think whatever we can do to help is what I would encourage the city to do.
If I could jump in here for a moment to add to Justin's answer. First of all, I want to be clear. For years, we've had a no-fee permit for sidewalk dining. Not many people actually get it, and most of the places up and down Solano Avenue don't have this permit, and obviously we don't enforce it rigorously. But we have a very simple permit process. There's no fee. So what we'd be talking about is a permit, waiving the permit fee for the parking space in the roadway, which again, we think that's a fine idea. We don't have authority to do that ourselves as staff people, but we would be happy to go to the City Council promptly to get that if that's something you think will help. And then with respect to Committee Member Chasty's questions about our process, I think given the situation that we're in, we're relying to some degree here more on common sense than on government procedure. And so we would look at things on a case-by-case basis. And if we feel like it's an easy approval, we do it. If it feels like it's a complicated approval, we start to engage the stakeholders, and maybe it needs to come to this committee or the Transportation Commission or maybe even the City Council. But we want to scale our process to the reality of the problem and not just have this is the way we do it because that's the way we decided we're going to do it. Try not to be bureaucratic about it. Thank you.
We do have a comment from Member Tiedemann.
Just a point of procedures to be clear while we're doing this via Zoom. Are we doing questions to staff about the presentation now, then public comment, followed by committee full discussion when we want to all make our, fuller comments?
That's correct.
Cool, just checking.
Okay. Member Chasty.
Do you have any concept of how quickly you could put in if you chose to go forward with taking up some parking for it, how quickly you could install some kind of barriers that would be sufficiently safe, like Jersey wall barriers?
Yeah, I'm not sure we know what we would install, so it's hard to answer that. We'd probably look for something that's both aesthetically nicer and a little bit more temporary. So, different locations might come with different solutions. One of the images that Justin showed, there were some planters, and some people putting planters down. That might be sufficient in some places. Other places, it may not be.
So we have Member Kane and I believe Member Charles had The questions take it that order.
Thank you. That was a great presentation, Justin. A lot of the slides that and examples that you're using are business districts that obviously use those areas for restaurants and dining. Are there other examples, because we do have professional services on the street, they have not been able to open like the restaurants have. Are there examples in other communities where people are getting haircuts or chair massages or in any way operating other businesses other than dining in those pockets of open space?
I haven't seen a lot of examples. I know there's been some discussion of it. The one area that I have seen some more detailed description is if you're starting to deal with structures or more involved uses, sort of scaling the review as you get more involved in what you're putting in the space, or as it becomes more like if it's a larger tent or larger facility you're putting. Would see any distinction or any need to have a huge distinction between what the activity was in the use. I'll see if Jeff has any other feedback on that. But we currently in what we're looking at, we're keeping it broad to business activity, not a particular use that we would.
I'm guessing the parameter is what business kind of needs it, right? I mean, it's not just something no one would normally do. In theory, they would need to use that space to generate lost revenue.
It does get a little more complicated as you need to draw electricity or other, powering out across the sidewalk or those kind of things. As you think about different uses, it can get more complicated. But
thanks again. It was a great presentation.
Okay, Member Charles.
Yeah, just echoing Member Kane's sentiments. Great presentation, but within the presentation, I was hoping to get a little bit more clarity to what the city would like versus maybe what they wouldn't like. Maybe just some considerations on the designs. I mean, we had a whole bunch of different designs, but is there like a yes or a no, or is there recommendations? Is the city leaning toward one design or another? And also, will the city be helping with maybe consulting with some of the businesses? I don't want to, we shouldn't wait too late until we say we're open for these businesses to figure out what design is going to be appropriate for them. These are things that they probably should be working on now.
Within the parameters that the council guide, they did say we could look at aesthetic and sort of aesthetic considerations within the guidance that we're putting out. I think we're mostly focused on the health and safety of this. Advisory bodies want to provide input on the design or aesthetic components of it. I think we'd welcome your feedback on that.
Okay, Member Sala.
I'm wondering about the permit process and if there's additional agencies that are going to need to sign off on these permits. Like, are businesses going to need to go to the fire department and have the fire marshal sign off on these, or is it just one signature that's required and a quick in and out?
I think it's one signature and a quick in and out. If there needs to be a consultation with other departments, we would do that as part of our quick review. That in most cases, we wouldn't consult with the fire department unless there is, I don't know, if it's in front of a fire hydrant or something. I suppose maybe we would do something like that. But in most cases, I think we could handle it within the community development department.
I really appreciate people being able to get this quickly. I think we're all, all of our businesses are trying to move as quickly as possible into this new reality.
Yes, Member Tasty, followed by Member Goldman.
With regard to any restaurant expansion, would you need to get a sign off from the health department?
I don't know the details of that. I would, Anne, do you have any idea about that?
Yeah, one of the property owners that I spoke with, who is a landlord to restaurant businesses, indicated that they have been working closely with the local contact that serves the city of Albany on behalf of Alameda County Health. So I think there are certain prescriptive requirements that they have to deal with, but that's independent of our review of an encroachment permit.
Yep. I'll just add, I think the ABC maybe need to get involved if there's alcohol served. So Member Goldman.
Can't hear me
Sorry.
at all.
Oh, there we go. We got you.
Oh, okay. Have you guys been talking about the idea of actually closing down streets to traffic? I think Berkeley is closing Catcher Street. Is that correct? Yeah, the idea, sort of like a little mini Berkeley, Solano, Albany night out concept.
So did you hear the question?
Yeah, so there have been discussions. It was part of the Transportation Commission's discussion in April. They did not make any recommendation for any closures or partial closures. So it has been part of the discussion, but it's had both favorable and opposing opinions aired. And the only other addition I would make is this would be Solano Avenue we'd be talking about if we're talking about our business district. We can't close San Pablo Avenue. And there are a lot of access and parallel route challenges with doing something like that on Solano as opposed to some areas that other cities are considering.
Okay, we have two questions here. I'll go with Member Tiedemann, followed by Member Sala.
Just what equipment does the city have that could help with this? You know, what to redirect traffic, to put barriers in place, or to provide seating and tables for businesses that might not have it, so that they don't have to, buy it.
Go ahead, Justin.
Not much is the short answer. We may get some more equipment available as other facilities that we've had to close are permitted to open, but we've used most of our barricades and other equipment for the current facility closure we have around the city.
Okay. Sorry, was it Sala? Member? Then followed by, okay. Yes, Robert.
If the subject of closing Solano Avenue came up again, I would encourage people to think about it in a way that allows for sharing of the space. So perhaps, regular retail and traffic can happen until 3 p.m. And then at 3 p.m. it switches over to the street closure for outdoor dining. I think that would be sort of a way of allowing both sides to be able to operate. I'd be concerned if the whole street was closed all of the time. I have a retail business on Solano, and I think that would have a very big impact on the little sales that I have right now doing curbside.
Thank you. Member Chafee.
I have two comments. One is, while the issue of closing Solano.
Sorry to interrupt, but are we moving into comments? I don't think we've opened it to public quite yet.
We have not opened. Yeah, we're not getting to. He's asking questions of staff. So, and then we're going to move into public comment. Did we pass into what? So let's just keep our comments to questions to staff, please.
Okay, well, I had, maybe it's partly a question, partly a comment. I don't want to violate the rules, but it seems to me that could we keep this discussion now, since we're dealing with what are almost emergency measures on a temporary basis, avoiding the more long-term problems and issues that would come up with closing Solano. Keep it just to something that would be less than street closure. The other one would be, what's the availability and the possibility of just getting temporary Jersey wall along with some decorative stuff? So Jersey wall being much more safe for pedestrians if you're doing something in the street with regard to seating and restaurants. movable Jersey walls. You know, they come in sections.
I think that right now, the city would be cautious about expending a lot of money on something like that until we get our arms around exactly what our financial impacts are from this incident, from this crisis. So I can't make a commitment here that we would spend money. I don't know what it would cost. If it's a few of them, maybe not much money. If it's turns out to be a long stretch of the street, that might be something very different.
Thank you. Do you have other comments from the members? I have a few questions. Just curious if, how does the ADA, just speak a bit about that on the using the sidewalk, for example, or even the parking spaces? How does a business address that?
So keeping the 6 feet clearance on the sidewalk is how we would be ensuring maintenance of access along the sidewalk for path of travel along the sidewalk. In terms of in the street, we would have to look at it case by case, but I think to the extent that restaurants are still available or to provide the service in their facility or at their door, this isn't, if it's not their only facility is in the street, I think some cities have been okay with not installing, or requiring installation of a ramp down to the street level for these because they are temporary and they're extension of the facility versus a standard. But we haven't, looked into it beyond seeing what other cities have done on that.
Question for this is Solano mainly, but the San Pablo would also be open for sidewalk and park in that type of public area? Or is it strictly for Solano?
The city has jurisdiction on the sidewalk side of San Pablo Avenue. I believe we maintain that, so we would be able to do that.
So it would be available. Okay, that's the extent of my comments at this point. So with that, unless there's any other comments from the members, we'll see if there's any public comment, which if we do, I think we're 3 minutes per public comment. Let's take a look.
Hi. Hi. Okay, a couple things. I'm trying to take feverish notes here. One, I agree with Member Sala for sure. We're in the midst of a pandemic, a real emergency. You should certainly waive fees for businesses who have barely been able to operate. That seems like a no-brainer. Also, in the document that we sent you on Tuesday, those articles had indicated that that's what most of the municipalities did. As far as the permits that you need, Tuesday we sent you a document that contains information about more than 40 or about 40 cities and counties who have implemented or are planning on implementing similar plans to help their businesses. I'm assuming that since it had a lot of information and names of business leaders and officials and council commission members, that some of you have reached out to some of those city and county officials because they could probably have simple answers on that. Or I apologize, I didn't send it to Justin Freed or Jeff Bond. We can forward it to you afterwards because that is a lot of information. We did a lot of legwork, so why do it twice? As far as, let's see, Member Montag's question about ABC, on May 20th, the ABC allowed on-trade outlets to serve alcoholic drinks to patrons on property that is adjacent to the licensed premises. So that's also a link that we sent you. So that settles that right there, covers areas adjacent to venues that comply with public health, safety, or welfare requirements. So that's linked to. As far as the conflicting businesses and uses for businesses, we've been in touch with about 40 businesses, and there's pretty unanimous support of utilizing outdoor space. And that includes realtors and financial advisors and people that would not use this space at all. So I think it really seems like every business person understands that this is important for our entire city, for our economy. So no one seems like they're going to be, hey, that's our parking space, so you can't put a table there. People would rather have a table there, have humans and that sit and eat in front of their business, and then maybe they'll come. So I think everyone feels that everyone's in the same place and understands that what helps somebody is going to help everybody. Thanks.
Thank you. I think the next speaker is Ian McLeod.
Yeah, good afternoon, Ian McLeod.
McLeod, sorry.
Yeah, McLeod. Yeah, thank you. I'd like to just express support for the use of the public spaces for restaurants and bars and other establishments. I think it's a great idea. Like some people have been saying, I think it will help other businesses too if it just brings more people to the street. So I think it's a positive for Solano Avenue and also for San Pablo Avenue. I think waiving fees for the use of the public parking spaces would be a good idea. And I think just streamlining the application process as much as possible. Hopefully it wouldn't get into multiple commission approvals or hearings, because that could take weeks or months. And I think we want to make it possible for business owners to put their seating areas in place with a minimum of investment, because already they're strapped. So I would not want to see, excessive requirements for barriers or other things, and just keep it to a minimum. How we get barriers in place is maybe one of the more expensive things, and it's too bad the city doesn't have any available. It sounds like they're all used up. I do see them around blocking off little park areas and other things. So there was one other idea, and I don't know how the city addresses this in terms of permitting, and it's not public space, but it's more on San Pablo, sharing parking areas from adjacent businesses, or letting a business use their own space, and whether that requires some other kind of permitting, or if that's, I would just be interested in knowing how staff would address that. It might be a business sharing a parking lot from an adjacent business, which there could be a lot of room, and allow a restaurant to really have a lot of extra income. I think that would be really helpful. And it would, of course, be dependent on private businesses agreeing to share. So that's really it. I think it's great we're considering these things, and I really wish, we could expedite it and make it quickly as possible. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, I have Todd Abbott, I believe.
Hi there. Yes, thank you. Just had to unmute myself, apparently. Well, I'm excited by this. This is something we've been thinking of and talking with the city about for some time. I do have a couple questions. One is who would be authorized to request this? Can it be a business owner, or would it have to be the property owner? I'm hoping it would be the business owner. As far as the accessibility issue is concerned, I suspect that the accessibility concern was why we saw so many of the examples had raised the street bed via wood or something to be level. I think that probably is why they did that. But I guess in this case, you're saying as long as there's a table available, require going down the curb, it would be adequate. Have you thought about table service? I know that some requirements say that they can have the tables outside, but they can't provide service to them. People can pick up their food and eat there, but not necessarily have table service. I don't know if that's a concern. That might be more of a health department question. I'm not really clear on that. Are you anticipating requirements for insurance? Again, I looked at, I think Sean had mentioned the Carmel by the Sea. I looked at their requirements, and they're requiring, $1 million liability insurance and things like that, which, would just be a rider on the existing policy. Probably wouldn't be a whole lot more, but it would be another step. And then what about the possibility of a business requesting that some of the street fixtures be moved, like a big belly shifted or something, to make room, shift around a little bit for a table. I don't have any particular location in mind, but it might exist. And certainly you're not going to move the large planters that are, made out of concrete, but there you go. And I guess the other question I would have would just be a comment would be, having a very clear statement of conditions of approval, so that, obviously that would help you folks, but it would also help the applicant as they're going through. And then a process for appeal, say that the neighbor is upset, or perhaps the service business that's above the restaurant really doesn't want to see the parking go. Some sort of process for approval. Oh, and then just one more thing, one idea to think about, when we have a block party, you have to have a certain percentage of your neighbors sign off on it. It might be something similar here, where you have to have, a certain percentage of the neighboring businesses, possibly the whole block sign off. But otherwise, I think it has great potential. I'm excited about the opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands being raised from the members of the public. Just want to double check. Okay, seeing none. We'll close public comment on this item. We'll bring it back to the members. And if I could, I would like some clarification. Does this, we're talking about, can affect private and public, or we're separating those two for some reason?
Are you, the question of parking lots?
Correct.
Yeah, I don't think we would have any objection to business or property owners working out an arrangement for the temporary use of their parking lot.
So there wouldn't be any issue with parking variance, like the code would say thou shalt have it, and then you're gonna, I guess I'm just saying, if you're gonna go to council, do you need to modify that ordinance, for example?
Yeah, there's some discretion in the planning and zoning code, and maybe Ann can add to it, but I think we're trying to be reasonable in our interpretation of our codes in a situation that was never designed to anticipate, to handle. So we want to help our business as much as we possibly can. Ann, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that if it's a situation where the landlord is in support of it, it's going to be beneficial to the business. I don't see that we would really need to interfere with that. Let all that goodwill, work itself out, and allow them to, have an alternative use of a parking lot that benefits the business.
I can appreciate staff being super flexible and super agreeable to it. I just didn't want that to be, oops, now we have to go back to council because the code says you can't have it. So just putting it out there if that's needed. And if I may, I don't think table service is an issue. I just want to make sure that's the case. That's my understanding. Okay. All right. With that, do we have any other questions? Yes, Member Tiedemann.
Well, we're going into comment. I have a bit, committee member Chisi and I actually had a meeting with Ian, as well as Vonnie Davidson and Amy Smollins, who have been sort of spearheading this idea with some of the businesses. And as a result of that, I mean, we've all seen the public comment they sent in. This is very much supported by a lot of businesses in Albany who want this, who see the benefit, even some who are not directly benefited, who are not restaurants or anything, who want the increased foot traffic and attention and just business. I did do some reaching out to some of the other localities that were considering or had instituted one of these plans, and I've in the past couple of days spoken to representatives from Huntington Beach, Livermore, and Berkeley, who are all implementing or considering these plans. And I got in touch, but haven't spoken yet, with someone from San Jose. All the plans look pretty similar in that it is streamlined, low-cost application for a temporary use permit for mostly use of parking spaces so that you can have outdoor seating. And to clear up one thing I did when I spoke to Berkeley, the chief of staff for Sophie Hahn, the vice mayor who is spearheading that plan, did say that they weren't really thinking about closing whole streets. That had been reported in some news outlets, but was erroneous because they don't necessarily want to do that. We're thinking about closing a lane, which is something I think we should consider, especially on San Pablo, or on Solano, given decreased traffic. I know that we discussed a lot of things during the Complete Streets discussion, but it seems to me that with decreased traffic, you could really bring Solano down to a one-way street if need be, and Marin could act as a good alternative, and that would allow you to use a lot more of the real estate there, considering that Solano is a pretty narrow main street for how much business it has. And then on the subject of parking lots, I think that's it's good that that's really easy to do because that's something that our businesses on San Pablo are really going to need, considering that they won't have the freedom to go on the street as much because San Pablo is much trickier. So I think the main goal for the city, and I think what that presentation showed that we're on the right track, is to really make sure that everything is open to whatever a business needs to do and feels like they need to do. So that as easy as possible should be the goal. With that in mind, I think that in the name of getting this done speedily, then we should pretty strongly counsel at the end of this meeting that they get staff to start working on this, getting it into effect, and hopefully work with the people who have the business owners on the ground, Bonnie Davidson, who's been, and the people she's contacted who have already started to do this work, as well as to work with maybe, advisory subcommittee of this committee and some people from the transportation committee if necessary, just to make sure that everything goes really smoothly.
Member Sala?
I am a little concerned about safety of people in parking spaces, and I hope that the council would think about providing some kind of a budget to help provide barriers to keep people who are eating in parking spaces in the street safe. Again, I think that it's hard for small businesses right now to be able to afford these things, and I would strongly encourage the council to come up with some sort of a budget to help facilitate that type of safety measure.
Thank you. Member Charles?
Yeah, I mean, I just think, just to add, before we consider about, closing, any part of Solano, I think we should also consider the effect that it would have in other areas, whether it be in, the flow of traffic on Marin, buses on Marin, what it would do for parking, which, we don't have a plan for. If we're diverting traffic to other areas, that means we're taking away, from other businesses. Again, and we also look at Solano and the mixed use. So there's a lot of commercial, there's a lot of residential. Is what are we saying to those, to those people who need, Solano or whatever for parking? Do we put them within the other neighborhoods? And what's the effect on, on those neighbors? So I think before we start talking about closing the street, I think there's a lot more to it than that.
Thank you. In fact, we'll get to Member Kane. Just make sure you mute your speaker mics when you're not speaking. Member Kane?
Hi, just have a lot of questions, but I'm just going to start with this, and I'm hoping that city staff can clear this up. I'm not sure what our action item here is, because it seems like what we're discussing is a mechanism that is essentially already in place where businesses can apply for public space outside of their restaurants or close a street for a block party and that kind of thing. Are we talking about adjusting the laws and ordinances that are already in place, or just supporting them and saying we'd like council to look at this and other things? And I do want to add that this is important. It's an important item for our council to spend their time on. We are in the middle of a pandemic. We do have regional unrest that is just now kind of settling itself. And so I'd like to spend some time also looking at the problem of vacancies. There's a lot of pieces to this that I think need attention. And so not only can we use resources for the council and our time, frankly, tonight, but we should also be looking at vacancies and other problems that are obviously on our doorstep now. So just thought I would put my 2 cents in there and remind city staff my question from the beginning was, doesn't this mechanism already exist?
Answer your question, essentially, yes. The only thing that doesn't exist is the fee waiver for the encroachment permit involved with a parking space. Everything else we could process right now.
So an economic development committee that hasn't met in 3 months has spent the vast majority of this meeting discussing something that already exists, minus the fee waiver. Is that what I just heard?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
But if I may also, to staff, aren't we also potentially looking at a restaurant to expand their footprint, so to speak? And I don't think that's necessarily, even though you folks say you're going to be flexible, and what you're doing is saying this is what we're going to do. We need to have some sort of codification that we're expanding business uses into the public right away.
We have a way now to allow outdoor seating in restaurants.
True, but potentially they could be they're expanding from what currently could be existing. Is that not what I heard earlier? Like if they wanted to put tables in front of an adjacent storefront, because they have the permission of the adjacent business or property owner, can they do that today?
I think we would.
I'll weigh in on that. The answer is yes. And I think what makes this conversation unique right now is the reality that we're trying to work within a framework of the shelter-in-place order that seems to be very fluid. And so that kind of forces us to have to look at the regulations in play, understand what the requirements are of the restaurant, how they have to comply with county health. So I think overall it's a very fluid thing and kind of an ongoing conversation and process that we're trying to navigate.
Okay, thank you. Do we have other comments from the members? Yes, member Robert, please.
Yeah, I had a couple of things. One, I appreciated Todd Abbott's comments. The other is that I think that what we're talking about here is a waiver of a number of normal things that would be required for what we're going to do under more or less an emergency basis, with an understanding that this is going to be a temporary use, and we're going to try to facilitate. And the reason for this is, as those of you who, like me, walk the avenue from time to time, there's an increasing number of vacant storefronts now. And there's no crystal ball, but we're going to see 10 or 20 more before this is over. Businesses are not going to make it no matter what we do, because the economics have just not played out well for them. And I have a couple of clients who have recently been retained to talk to in the city of Berkeley, where businesses that have invested a couple $100,000 about to go under in restaurants. So what I'd like to do now is pretend that I'm a business, either a restaurant or any business, and I come to you and I say, I would like to put something in the public right away, immediately right next to my building. But then I'd like to take up 2 parking spaces that are in front of my business. Walk me through the process. How soon can I do that? What do I need to do? Where do I need to sign? And for how long am I allowed to do that?
So the way that would work is we would provide that interested party with an encroachment permit and ask them to give some particulars in terms of how many tables they'd like to have set up relative to their business location. And that's something that they could provide to us and we could issue an encroachment permit. It's not a particularly complicated process.
So we're talking basically, five working days?
I would say more like 2 to 3. And just so that everyone else is aware, obviously the planning staff, we have building staff as well. We've still been going into the office on a semi-regular basis to maintain the level of service that we had pre-shelter in place. Be a pretty quick turnaround.
So if I could go back to an earlier point, the reason why I'm harping on the idea of temporary jersey walls, I've presented people where a car has gone through the front of the restaurant window. So it doesn't happen very often, but on occasion, cars do something erratic. So you can have decorative things with a jersey wall, but a jersey wall is much more likely to protect people at a restaurant table, especially where you have very limited leeway in terms of space. So if the city could acquire, if I were to approach the city with this idea, I think we should look at this as a pilot project, if you would, where we would quickly get maybe 5, 10, 15 businesses this access and try to see what we could do and see how well it worked so that we could get something up and running right away and then address some of these other more long-term questions. We already have a street program that we're dealing with. We haven't completed the consideration of. There are all the things that Alan's alluding to that we need to get back to. But I think this would be a good thing to do on a temporary and a more or less project. Like, let's see how well this goes.
Great. So I'll just say that I'm in favor of the opportunity for us to expand the dining options and also potentially business options, as stated by I think Member Kane, to allow them to expand outdoors. Makes sense. Private public property. I'm a little leery of talking about strict closures at this point. It seems like we have an opportunity to see how it goes with expanding into sidewalks into parking spaces and see how that is received and see what the capacity of the restaurants even to serve those customers. So with that, do we have a motion? Yes, Member Tito.
Before we motion, I forgot one or two things that I just wanted to go over quickly. First of all, when I spoke to the member of Sophie Hahn's office, one of the main points there was that Solano is half Berkeley, and that's part of Vice Mayor Hahn's district. And since she's spearheading this effort, it is probably worth it for either City Council or city staff to reach out to Berkeley to see what we can do in collaboration here to make this, whatever plan we put into effect, interlink with Berkeley's plan and go all the way up the avenue. And also about why we're discussing this, I think it's good to hear that this is already a pretty expedited process, but I think in addition to what we have that already exists, there needs to be some outreach about it, of proactively showing people you can do this. This is an easy process that you can apply for. We're willing to give up some parking to do this, and this is how it's done, and this is how we can help you, help your business.
Great, thank you. Do you have a motion out there somewhere?
Well, I'm happy to make a motion, but I'm not quite sure if we need a motion, considering what I would be asking for is already in place and city staff is already ready to do it.
I believe staff's, sorry, go ahead.
I think we should recommend to the city full support for the staff action that they're doing and get a report back in 6 months to see how well it worked.
And thank you. And just to be clear, part of that is the fee waiver that staff's asking for.
Waiver, and I'd like to put in there that the city shoulder the burden for the traffic safety, whatever barriers we're talking about.
I don't know if that's something maybe staff can make comment on, because I don't.
Well, maybe they can't, but it can be brought to the city. I mean, what we're doing is recommending to the city, supporting what the staff is doing, and asking for the city fee waiver and put in adequate safe barriers at city expense.
Just from clarification from staff, I mean, is that termed correctly for you folks to bring it forward as an idea? You shall do this. And I'm not saying that's what you said. I'm just saying that.
Well, we can't say the city.
I know, but go ahead. Sorry.
So all we can do is make our motion a recommendation. The city will do with it as it will.
Are you comfortable with that? Staff, just to make sure.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just want to make sure staff was understood it and was okay with that. All right. So I'm seeing nods. All right. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
If I didn't hear specifically in the motion about waiving the fees.
Yeah. Yeah. Once you repeat your motion, but Robert did mention that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that then.
Yeah, it includes waiving the fee, includes with adequate safe barriers at city expense. And if you want, complimenting the staff for their proactive attitude and way of and approach to the problem.
All right, so there's the motion.
And it was a motion by committee member Chasty and a second by committee member Sala. Is that correct? It's hard to see
That's
that.
correct.
Okay.
Before we take roll calls, any other comments? Yes, member Goldman. You're muted, unfortunately, on your phone. There you go. You're good.
I just wanted to add that perhaps we should check in earlier than in 6 months, because I think that what we're looking at here is now shelter in place, and we will not be in shelter in place at some point in the future. Maybe the check-in time would be when shelter in place is lifted. We could then look at how is this working? Does it need to be adjusted in any way? Maybe some things could be, permanent or more long-term. So my only adjustment would be not check in 6 months, but check in when shelter in place is lifted.
Member Chasty, are you good with that?
The reason I picked 6 months is that there's so much ambiguity about what we're going to be doing, and I don't want to put an unnecessary burden on staff to give a report back. But yeah, earlier feedback would be great. Shelter in place will probably be lifted within the next couple of months, maybe even within a month. So I don't think staff would have time to be able to evaluate and report back except in some informal way. So yeah, I'm happy. If you want, we can make it 3 months if the staff would tolerate having to report back with some sort of results of the activity by then. What do you think, Jeff? 3 months?
Even if it was informal, just check in. It's fine.
We'll keep you posted at every meeting. That's not at all for us to report.
So amended to allow for informal feedback as we meet.
Thank you. All right, so we have a motion, a second. Is there any more comments? Seeing none, please take the roll call on this item.
Committee member Kane,
Abstention.
committee member Taro,
Committee member Charles, could you repeat, please? We couldn't hear you.
Abstain as well.
committee member Chasty,
Aye.
committee member Goldman,
Aye.
committee member Sala,
Aye.
committee member Tiedemann,
Aye.
Chair Montag.
Aye. Thank you. So with that, we will move to item 6-2, and that is discussion of short-term business recovery strategies.
I will share my screen in a moment. All right, so this is kind of continuing the conversation you just had about business recovery strategies, but these are things that are not focused on the public right of way. So it's sort of everything else. I'm going to highlight some strategies that we could employ, and we'll ask the committee members to share which of the strategies you think are most effective. So you might want to take some notes. There's only 4 slides, so I promise it won't take a lot of your time, but just kind of think about which of these strategies maybe you want to suggest that we prioritize moving forward.
Bringing up the slide, when we talk about short term, we're really thinking in terms of while there's some significant degree of shelter in place that's affecting the operations of our businesses, the longer term will be the longer term economic recovery, which is a different discussion at a future meeting.
Yes, yeah. Thanks, Jeff, for bringing that up. I think it's important to note that we are also thinking about that, but we're not talking about it tonight. But it's something that we're taking seriously, and it's something that we can start a conversation with you all about in the future as well. So in terms of getting employees and customers to businesses, there weren't any major trends in our survey. These are the survey results that I promised we'd dig a little deeper into. So here they are. It seems opinions on these items being useful is mixed, and identifies a need for us to conduct more outreach and focus a program that allows for supporting businesses on a case-by-case basis. So certain businesses, it seems, could really benefit from these strategies to ensure access for employees and customers, and others may not benefit or may not like them. So I think that supports our plan to do some of this case-by-case work. It's not surprising to see that businesses are interested in financial support of a variety of kinds. In particular, they're very supportive of making sure local business associations have resources. We certainly appreciate our local business associations always, but right now they have particularly been helpful to businesses during this struggle. And it's clear that businesses appreciate that through the survey results. They also would like help with loans, which the Chamber has provided help with loans as well. So these are things that I think are things we can continue to do. From these results, we can deduce that local businesses believe the city has a role in providing information and guidance. In particular, they found our information about public health guidance useful. I think that's great. We put a lot of effort into it. And if you haven't been receiving that, we have many ways to sign up for our notifications so you can learn more about public health guidance. And it's good to know that this is useful to businesses, and we will plan to continue that work. They also see the benefit of being connected with other businesses, which I think the Chamber's webinars have done a really nice job of. They've provided a forum for businesses to connect, but there's certainly other kinds of forums. For now, they would be virtual, that we could provide for businesses to connect with like businesses and learn about how to adapt to this new normal. And the good news is we're doing many of these things, and we'll plan to continue doing that work. And this is the last group. Other strategies that don't really fit into a category. Local businesses would like to see us recruit compatible business uses for vacant storefronts, and they could use assistance with marketing and bringing people to their locations through special events. Our economic development strategic plan, which we have not mentioned tonight because it seems like there's more items, does include some of these items. We do, our priorities for 2020 pre-COVID were to recruit businesses. We had already started that work before the pandemic hit, and also started working on some marketing efforts. So it sounds like those are still of use to businesses during this time. So we may shift exactly what those look like now, given the pandemic, but it certainly makes sense that we would continue doing that work. we're looking at the committee for guidance on how to prioritize these efforts to administer and that we can administer. And first, we'd like to see if you have any questions and then provide time for public comment. And then if you bring it back for discussion, it would be helpful to hear from each of you which actions from that list you think is most effective. I have here, I think I need to stop my screen so that the chair is able to manage more easily public comment or more easily manage your questions and discussion, but I can bring this slide if you need to see it later. And that's all I have.
Great, thank you. So let's bring it back to the committee. Who wants to go first? No one? Come on. Member Sala, thank you.
If you're asking us to prioritize, I would say that the other category seems like it is full of a lot of very important things that could really have a big impact on our businesses. After that, I think, the financial support is a very important piece to this, but I understand also that our city may not be able to be in a position to provide kind of support. Beyond that, it seems like the informing and connecting would be next on my list, followed by mobility being last.
Thank you. Yes, Robert.
I concur with what Stephanie just said. I just want to go back for a second to the earlier motion we adopted and just say one thing. I thought that Todd Abbott's point about making sure that the staff and the applicant poll the neighbors to make sure that there's not going to be some last surprise dispute over what's happening with the parking, making sure that that gets done so we don't end up with some kind of warfare over that. Now, staff said that they're already assuming that's going to be done, so I didn't put it in the motion, but I just want to raise that point. And going back to this, I think Stephanie's got the priorities right. There are two things I would say. One is that there's a bunch of graffiti that's starting to crop up. I think we should stay on top of that. And along the same lines, if as we get more boarded up and closed storefronts, we're going to have more problems. So I think recruitment is very, very critical at this point, that we try to do what we can to help businesses move in, help businesses stay. If we can maintain and help strategically for businesses to survive, great, we should do that. And then if they can't, to do what the city should prioritize what they can to recruit new businesses.
Thank you. Anyone else? I will, oh yes, Member Kane.
Thank you. I'll put my bullseye out there. It's vacancy. I used to use an analogy that had to do with diseases and how vacancies spread, but I will obviously reserve my analogy. But I think it's the #1 danger. The graffiti is incredibly bad right now. And I'm not sure how to address that. But if you're going to invite people to look at a vacancy for a potential business location, I think that the city needs to, or there needs to be a for maintenance and graffiti and that kind of thing. I'm also part of a walking group that's been walking the street now for over 10 years, and we've actually been attacked twice in the last month from people who are just experiencing some sort of trauma in their lives and are out in the street. And so I also see the need for street behavior, or people that need resources that have mental health issues. Our streets are just, anyway, mental health, vacancies, and graffiti. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other, yes, Goldman.
Stephanie's.
Sorry,
So I concur
Member
with
Goldman?
Stephanie's list of. Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I'll get a headset for next time. So I concur with Stephanie's priorities. I And I've been wondering for a long time if there's any, and I know this is, I read in other cities, this is happening a little more right now because of this sort of emergency, is to have a conversation with the landlords about adjusting the rent. Because it seems like part of the vacancy issue is that some of the rents are so astronomical. And maybe now that we're sort of in crisis, there could be more of a conversation around that issue of the landlords being willing to, I mean, obviously they have to make their mortgage payments, they can't go under, but if there's some room in between of the landlords being able to make their expenses not be, you know, adjusting their profit a little bit to allow for businesses to come in. That's my thought. I don't know if that's something conversation the city could have. And then I also thought that the city might have, in terms of the information about funding and loans, the city might have more access to information about federal and state, well, the federal funds were the small business funds. There seemed to be a lot of urgency with applying for those quickly. And so if the city has access to any information that the public doesn't have, and that could be promulgated quickly, because with those loans, it seemed like it was first come, first serve, and it ran fast. So those are my thoughts about things that perhaps the city could do.
Thank you. Member Sala.
I would caution everyone to tread carefully into this territory for a variety of reasons. But one is that I think that this pandemic has affected different businesses in very different ways. And some businesses are booming right now, and they should not, I don't think, be able to get the same break as another business that has been decimated by this, or I don't know just the right word, but I think that it's been very uneven how it's impacted different businesses, and to put some one blanket policy out that applies to everyone is not the right move here.
Thank you. Any other comment? Oh yes, Member Tiedemann.
I'd like to agree with some of the things that have been said, especially around the info that's available on federal and state funds. From the business owners I've talked to recently, it seemed like that process was really about who you know, how good of a relationship you have with your banker, whether you got one of those payroll protection loans or not. So as much as the city can do to inform on that process and make it so that it's not such a unequal sort of thing. And then also, I think the role, it seemed like information was really requested on that survey. And I think just giving out info and keeping up to date on what's available can't be underrated here. And then I'm also curious, Alan, you said that vacancy is your biggest concern, but I'm curious what we do with that right now, considering that I think it's going to be really hard to fix that problem during a pandemic or in the immediate aftermath of a pandemic, seeing as we're going to see a huge economic downturn. And last, I'd like to note we haven't taken public comment on this issue, and I do see at least one hand is raised, so I want to make sure we get to that at some point.
If I had that answer for you, I wouldn't give it out now. The reality is there's a lot of things you can do proactively as opposed to just sit on the side of the lake with your fishing pole in the water. You can go out and proactively hunt out businesses that there's a great opportunity, like Stephanie said, there are businesses on Solano that are doing quite well actually, and some of those could expand. That would be the first thing that you do, is turn to your district and look for expansion opportunities. But we don't have a full-time staff person to make those phone calls and to look into those types of leads. I myself had to call the homeroom, the macaroni place in Oakland, when we had a vacancy at Cantina del Sol. So it takes proactive work, and if I had an answer for you, I'd give it to you. And since I have the air for just a second, I do want to say, back to the point of high rents, There are a lot of property owners out there that actually rely on the income from their properties to sustain them as members of the world. I know several retired people that own businesses on Solano Avenue that are just property owners, and they actually need that income. The larger picture in terms of rents being high is actually the duration of leases. That has been an incredible wake up for me. I never knew the length that some of these leases, some of the business owners have signed, and especially when it involves kitchen equipment or drilling, those types of modifications to a building. And it's also important to make sure that people walk away from their business with dignity, not being in debt to the tune of $100,000 for the next 10 years for a business that they can't run, but they have to pay rent for. So those leases are a bigger problem than daily rents. But thank you.
I just want to mention, it sounds like we're getting into discussion and there are some hands raised. I know Committee Member Tiedemann mentioned that.
Thank you. Any other comments? As far as, yes, Member Charles.
No, I just had, was just going to echo the same sentiments as Stephanie on the priorities. And just to kind of add, this is just some out of the box thinking as we talk about the barriers in the cities, how we don't have, there's a shortage of barriers. An employee or an owner, parking their car in a designated area in a parking space where maybe dining is for, 8 hours could be a natural, could be a defense as far as people being able to pull in and out. So parking could be a consideration at some point.
Okay, any other comments? Then I will just add, as far as potential priorities to look at, maybe some sort of employment kind of assistance or connection, trying to connect dislocated employees who now are looking for jobs, and then employers looking to gear up. Could be of some help, and there could be some partners already in place to connect those dots. And then as far as the marketing goes, I think it could be more focused or something to can strategize around. Perhaps, I think it could be compelling considering the crisis that we're in, a shop local, but so kind of speaking to, hey, do you still want to see this business remain in your community? Let's go support them. And maybe use that marketing leverage in consultation with the other business partners that we have to see if that's worth doing. Because it seems like it could be something to consider. And then the only thing I would look at is maybe there is some resource around how businesses reopen in this kind of new normal, and educating those folks. Some are more sophisticated, don't need it, but some may need it. With that, if it's okay, then we'll go ahead to take public comment. And I did see a hand. I don't see any. Yes, we have Bonnie Davidson.
Hi guys, I'm working at a farmer's market, so thanks for hearing me, and I hope it's quiet enough. So I actually, wow, your conversation is really interesting, and I want to stay on my own point, but I have two ideas I just want to throw in there. One, we should recruit Base Camp Bakery. They're at a bunch of farmers markets. They're hugely successful. They want a retail space, and we could use a bread bakery on Solano of their style. Two, local artists to do murals where we're getting graffiti, especially on boarded up storefronts. We're doing ours in the next couple of days here. Three, what I'm really on this call for is we are so excited to see consideration about thinking outside the box on outdoor spaces. Amy Smallins and I have worked really hard to provide a plan for you guys on ways we could do this that don't require big closures, that don't require a lot of impact on the surrounding areas, but just really work with kind of smaller footprints of what we all have. And we have so many supporting businesses that we've been able to reach, and we know that we can find more as we can reach out further. We're really excited to help with this, and every city, that we have talked to, and I'm here in Los Altos, and they're saying, oh, we're so excited for our outdoor dining. we're so excited for this. We want to get out and support our businesses, but we're, you know, happy to do it outdoors. I'm really hopeful that Albany is proactive on this, and I appreciate city staff kind of taking it on, and I hope you guys put it forward to the council to help all of us small businesses who need new thinking outside of the box so that we can stay in Albany. So I'm going to end on that, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Next up, sorry, I keep jumping. Todd Abbott.
There. Thank you again. I think, you know, there's a saying about great minds or something, but Mr. Chasty and I are just thinking alike tonight. I just want to reiterate his comments about the graffiti. I want to reiterate his comments about recruitment being key. You know, you have to look at every problem as an opportunity. With all these vacancies is a real problem. It's also a huge opportunity. And we can really draw some businesses here that can make a big difference and bring people to the street, maybe demographics we don't currently have coming to the street. If we have some effort there, I'm hoping that Chair Montag has a little experience with helping us, because I don't know the first thing about how to recruit a business, but I'm hoping he has experience. As far as the money issues, the chamber has been very open about this, and I know that the city as well is directing people to resources. There are resources that are set up specifically to help businesses navigate the PPP process or the EIDL process, and we're always happy to do that. As we're considering what to do, one thing I want you to think about is high impact for low cost. The thing that came to my mind was signage. We don't have nice signage off the freeway directing people to our commercial districts. That seems like a relatively efficient thing to do that could have a big impact. It's a nice, attractive signage. Another plan that I like the idea of is some sort of relationship. I'm not sure what sort of relationship it would be, but some sort of relationship with a consultant for businesses to consult. That's what consultants do. Information on being safe in their businesses. We had a speaker on the chamber a few weeks ago, and people were really eating up that information. So how to make your location safe for yourself, your employees, and your customers. And I think that's all I really had on my list here, but I just want to reiterate a lot of what's been said here. I'm very excited we're having this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think the last speaker I see is Amy Smollins.
Hi again. I know we discussed this in 6.1, but just want to elaborate a little bit. As Bonnie Davis mentioned, we did send you a detailed letter of our proposal, tentatively called Albany Inside Out, which a local designer came up with. It was signed by almost 40 business owners and managers and landlords, and we've actually had more on board since we sent it. Pretty much anytime we talk to someone, they think it's a great idea. It was near unanimous enthusiasm, even among people that would not use it. There's restaurants, cafes, toy stores, home decor shops, music venues, fitness establishments, realtors, etc. There's all sorts of stuff. As far as Alan, I agree with Member Kane's comment that vacancies are the biggest problem, and we don't want to have more storefronts like La Crema, Valparaiso, Zan's, Gathering Truck, Wild Cards, Futon Shop. So, and that's what would happen if businesses can't accommodate enough customers to make a living. So all businesses realize that the more foot traffic there is, the more potential customers there are for them, for all the remaining businesses. Albany architect Ian McLeod, who spoke earlier, designed and sent you guys some basic renderings of different examples of how outdoor space can be repurposed, using examples of businesses that are supportive of Albany Inside Out. That's not exclusive. It just shows some ways that space can be utilized, and it shows staff that it's pretty easy. Addressing Abbott and Member Chasty's comments, yes, coordination is really important, coordination between blocks. Vonnie and I have spoken to so many business owners and managers and landlords and employees, and given that we would like to remain in this process, since we've done a great deal of legwork, we could help communicate and coordinate among businesses, let you guys know and staff know who's on board on certain blocks, and that would, I think that would really benefit the process. Just have a couple questions for you, which hopefully you can answer. On the document that we sent you this past Tuesday, which plan descriptions of other municipalities have impressed you, since there were about 40? And in it, other than Member Tiedemann, who mentioned that, what cities and counties have you contacted, and what have you learned that could help Albany's plan be more successful? Got 20 more seconds, but thank you very much. Thanks, and stay in touch.
Thank you. So with that, we'll bring it back to the closed public comment, and we'll bring it back to the members. But before we do, staff, do you need any kind of other motion? You just wanted the input about the priorities, is that correct, from each one of us?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then we've done that. So I'll bring it back to the members. Do they have any last comments or input they'd like to provide? My window is blocking you, Member King, sorry.
Thanks.
Go
No, just a
ahead.
quick clarification in terms of street behavior. This does affect business owners. We do have business owners who have reduced staff, who have to come to work alone now just to check on their businesses or whatever. And they are also running into characters who we are probably all visually familiar with. So just wanted to clarify that one comment that I made earlier.
Thank you. Any other last comments on this item? Member Sala.
I'm just curious, we have a great list here. Would it be possible to ask for a dedicated city staff member that could implement these things and focus on, business recruitment and, working out the graffiti abatement, for instance, and the marketing plans and, all of these special events that people are talking about? I think from the beginning, our committee has kind of had that on our wish list. And I know that there hasn't been a budget for it or room for it in the past, but it seems like now of any other time, that type of person would be of utmost importance.
Thank you for that comment. Is there a response from staff at this point on that? Or is it for another day, an agendized item?
Yeah, I think that for another day when we have a little bit better insight into what our financial situation is, I will say that for those of us that are on staff, while we do a lot of different things, and economic development was one of them, in the last couple of months, it's become a much higher priority than it has before, frankly. And some of the, so that I think you'll be seeing more of us and more attention to these issues. But as for a new staff person, I kind of got the sense from the finance director.
It's challenging, I can imagine. Okay.
It's not, most cities are going in the other direction right now.
I would caution the thinking and remind everyone about sales tax dollars contributing to the general fund in our city. And if a high number of businesses go out, I think our finances are going to be look different. Same with business licenses and things like that, and how we got to think about how those things contribute to our financial situation as a city. So it may pay for itself.
I do want to echo what Jeff said about that we do have staff to do that. I just want to clarify, we have, I certainly, that's a main part of my function, but also, as you see the faces here and some of the faces you don't see right now, our community development department does take our economic development program very seriously. And we actually all play a major role in that. So just because there's not one individual staff member, I just want to clarify that we do have people who are working on these programs.
I wasn't trying to negate your efforts in any way. I do appreciate everything you guys do. I just think.
Great, thank you. So with that, I'm going to close this item and see if there's any other items here. We have 7 future agenda items. Am I right? Is that the next item? Do we have any ideas for that, staff, or are you looking for input from the members at this point? Hello?
Yeah, I think we will at this point, we're looking for input from you. We will probably come back to you with a more detailed analysis of the results of the survey, and you know, in a few weeks' time, the shelter-in-place regulations may have evolved. It's hard to predict exactly what will be on the highest priority, and
Okay.
we're trying to stay on top of it as quickly as possible.
Okay, understood. Any other input on number 7 from the members here? Yes, Member Tiedemann.
Just I mentioned this to staff before our meeting, but just to continue the work that we started before we took our little unplanned hiatus because I'm a stickler for rules, we have to do chair elections, and also we were talking about reorganizing some of our subcommittees to shift our focus around. So we should keep that in mind for when we meet again.
Sounds good. Anything else? Member Charles?
Yeah, no, I was just wanted to add that, you know, is we have some great, you know, energy in the EDC as our city council, and as well as in the community groups, and especially with the presentations that were heard today. And as we know, you know, we're going to have to go into things a lot differently in this post-COVID world. So I think that the better we are, and you know, as a community, and kind of harnessing that energy and all getting on the same page to a good plan is, I mean, I think we have some great people who are willing to go above and beyond, where, you know, the city doesn't necessarily have to do all these things, because you have a, you know, a community out there that's willing to fight with you guys. So
Good point. Thank you. Okay, seeing no other hands come up, we will close item 7 and adjourn the meeting. I want to thank everyone for their time and the members of the public for speaking and joining us for this meeting. So we'll look forward to seeing everyone next month.